folks, good evening and welcome to Phantoms Monsters Personal Reports, where I narrate some of the more recent past cryptid and unexplained sightings and encounters submitted to Phantoms and Monsters. And like tonight, I'm going to also detail some current past investigations. So thanks for joining me. The Phantoms and Monsters radio channel is made possible by you clicking the subscribe button and by you sharing our programming. Super chat and super thanks donations are always appreciated. As well, you can click the Buy Me a Coffee link and banner, which are shown below. So thanks for your consideration. Now, I've had some people ask me about reading some of the things I've actually written about in the books. Some of the cases and such. So I figured tonight we'd start off with that. So I'm going to be actually reading from the book with this first incident. But I've had a lot of questions about this from people who have read the book. And I figured, for those who are not familiar with it, I'll just go ahead and read it. I will say this. It wasn't something I was involved with for very long. Just a matter of days, actually, but it's profound and it's something that really affected me. Abduction and alien contact experience reports can quickly trigger skepticism with an investigator, especially if the information is received by telephone or in person. The demeanor of the individual is usually full of fear, confusion, and uncontrolled emotion. It's important to listen and avoid making instant judgments based on the first interaction. But sometimes you will receive a call in which you know that something remarkable occurred in a person's life and that you are now about to become part of their story. So in July 2009, I received that call. A young woman named Mandy stated that her life had become a living hell and that she could no longer leave the house in the evening. I'm literally afraid of the dark and under siege in my own home at night. That's what she told me. Mandy was living in a farmhouse outside a small town in East Central Washington, less than a mile from the Idaho border. About 2 weeks prior to contacting me, her and her mother had noticed bright red and white lights hovering above the Coeur d'Alene Mountains. As they watched the lights, Mandy began to feel dizzy and fearful. That night, she had a horrific nightmare that involved constant flashing lights and loud mechanical noises. The next morning, she woke feeling nauseous and lightheaded. Mandy was a school teacher, but had to call in sick. Now, by the next day, Mandy began to feel better, but the lights over the mountains continued on for several nights. She no longer had any dreams, but she still had the sense of fear linger with her. Her mother thought that Mandy was simply overreacting to the sighting of the lights. Then a few nights later, Mandy and her mother were in the kitchen cleaning up after a late dinner. They began to hear popping sounds coming from the backyard. As they looked out the window, they both noticed hundreds of small red and white lights flying in all directions. Each time a pair of lights collided, there was a distinct popping sound. Mandy ran into the living room and looked out the window. There were red and white lights everywhere by the road and in the field. Her mother picked up the telephone in order to call the police, but there was no dial tone. By that time, the lights in the house began to flicker. There were also strange sounds coming from the roof, similar to scratching. This continued for about 5 minutes, then suddenly stopped. They were both confused and scared. The phone was now working, but her mother thought there was no reason to call the police. Now, Mandy walked outside to see if there was any indication of what had just occurred. Everything seemed fine, but there was a slight odor in the air. She told me that it reminded her of burnt motor oil, but she couldn't find a source. She eventually went back into the house, but still bewildered by what had happened. The next night at approximately 10:30 p.m., Mandy was getting ready for bed. While standing in front of her bathroom mirror, she noticed two loud thuds on the roof. She went into her mother's room to see if she had heard the sounds, but she was already in bed asleep. While walking in the upstairs hallway towards her room, she heard several more thuds on the roof, as well as scampering sounds in the attic. She looked out her bedroom window and once again witnessed hundreds of small red and white lights flying all about in different directions. The noises in the attic had awakened her mother. They both yelled for each other as all the electricity in the house cut off. They ran into Mandy's room and sat nervously on the bed. The thuds on the roof and the scampering in the attic continued. They lit a few candles, hoping the activity would soon end. They felt like prisoners in their own home, worried about what would happen next. Then suddenly, the lights came back on and the noises stopped. Mandy later told me that the commotion went on for at least an hour. Neither of them got much sleep that night. A few days later, Mandy contacted me by telephone. I was referred to her by a paranormal investigator in Spokane. As soon as I began talking to Mandy and her mother, I sensed that this was not any run-of-the-mill unexplained encounter. They had once again experienced similar activity the previous night. Now, Mandy commented that she felt like they were both in danger and asked if I had ever heard of a similar experience. I was understandably dumbfounded by the series of events, but at the same time, I was concerned that the activity may eventually lead to physical intervention, but I didn't mention it to her. I believe that we talked for about 3 hours. There was nothing exceptional about Mandy and her mother. They had lived together in the family home since Mandy was born. There was no information offered about Mandy's father, so I didn't press the issue. Her mother had recently retired from her position as a state worker. I asked them to keep a journal on the activity and to contact me. This is my normal routine when working cases. Now, during the interview, Mandy asked, "Why is this happening to us?" I didn't want to tell her that they may have been singled out, but I really did sense that this may have been the case. Little did I know it would be my last contact with Mandy. After I got off the telephone with Mandy and her mother, I started to examine several incident databases in an attempt to find any similar events. Continued activity to the same witnesses over a period of time is somewhat unusual, and I was concerned that there may eventually be an escalation. The next day, I expected to receive a follow-up phone call from Mandy. In fact, I called and left a message asking that she let me know if there had been any further activity. I waited for 3 days, and no telephone call or email came my way. Then, on a Sunday afternoon, the anticipated call came. It was Mandy's mother. She apologized for not getting back to me, but there was an obvious distress in her voice. After a brief pause, she called me and said, "Mandy is missing." I got a sudden sick feeling in my stomach. Mandy had gone to bed not long after we had talked on the telephone. Her mother remained downstairs in the living room watching television. At about 11 p.m., she decided to go to her bedroom. As she passed Mandy's bedroom, she noticed the light coming from the bottom of the door. She knocked on the door in order to check on her. There was no response. As she opened the door, the room went completely dark. She flicked on the light switch by the door and observed that Mandy was not in her bed. She called out to her and there was no response. Panic was beginning to set in as she literally screamed Mandy while running throughout the house. There was no trace of her, inside or out. Mandy was gone. The local authorities had no explanation. All of Mandy's personal items, including her car, remained. It was as if she simply vanished. Since Mandy was an adult, there wasn't really much the police investigators could do. They suspected that she took off with somebody during the night. I asked her mother to keep me updated, but I never really expected to hear back from her. As far as I know, Mandy has never returned home. The last time I made an inquiry with the Washington State Police, her case remains unsolved. Now, Mandy's disappearance still haunts me. I am certain that she was abducted by an unknown force, but that doesn't absolve me from feeling a bit of guilt. I realize that my regret seems ridiculous since there was nothing that I could have done. Nonetheless, I suspect that the stigma of her ordeal will always remain with me. And, now it's been 13 years now since that occurred. And I have checked several times since I wrote that. I have checked with the state police, Washington State Police, and there's no trace. None of her credit cards or anything like that has come up. No trace of her, no contact with anybody. Her mother has passed since then. I know what happened to Mandy really hastened her demise. I'm sure of it because she was pretty broke up. So this is, I'll be honest, this is probably one of the cases that really did kind of almost get me to quit doing what I do. Lon, when did you say the Mandy case happened? That was in July 2009. I have, like I said again, I have checked this. I've kept up with it. Again, I wish there's something I could have done. I'm kind of glad that I did mention that I felt something may happen or may escalate. But it's one of those things. I mean, you do get a case every once in a while, even though it was as briefly as I was involved with this one, that just really shake you to your core. And this was one of them. So if you have any more questions later on, we'll go ahead and go through that then. The next one is one I received not too long ago, where a woman describes in detail her encounter with a giant chalk white humanoid while at a Florida highway rest area. She showed empathy towards the being, even though she was shocked by it. Now she writes, in the spring of 2007, my then boyfriend and I were on our way from New York down to Miami to go to a music festival. We were driving south on the highway along the east coast of Central Florida when we pulled into a rest area so that we could catch a nap. We had been driving all day when he decided that he desperately needed a short rest before getting back behind the wheel. Now, we had very recently bought the van, and he did not think that I could handle maneuvering, so he was doing all the driving. We parked and jumped into the back of the van and laid down on a futon mattress that we had laid there. He told me to leave him alone, and he proceeded to pass out from exhaustion. I was pretty freaked out because the rest area building was unmanned, locked up, and dark inside. The restrooms were closed. A small rest area building was surrounded by dark woods. There were about 4 of the cars in the small parking lot, but no sign of any drivers. So I imagine they were having an emergency laydown as well. Now, normally I would never have set foot outside the van alone in such a scenario. My instincts told me not to get out of the van. But I had taken some Midol for menstrual cramps, and they had given me brutal nausea. I needed some pretzels and mustered up all my courage and opened up the passenger side door and squeezed through the space between our vehicle and the vehicle parked directly next to ours. Now, as soon as I had a clear line of sight to the front of the rest area building, I saw the thing. I saw it clearly. Straight ahead, I saw the brightly lit front facade of the rest stop. To the left of the doors was it. To the right of the doors was a vending machine. So immediately it communicated with me. I was flooded with what I consider a telepathic message from the being. I cannot be seen. I cannot be seen. I must travel by night and exist in darkness. I cannot be seen. I cannot be seen. And I felt an enormous wave of compassion for the being rather than fear, which may seem a little more logical reaction to someone hearing this story. Now, for some reason, my brain only characterized it as one thing initially, an outsider worthy of compassion and tolerance. Now, its skin was pure chalk white, not the skin tone white, but the color white. Its eyes were several times larger than ours. It had two little air holes for a nose and a very thin mouth. Its frame was completely concealed by its enormous long black hooded robe. It looked as though it was quite gaunt underneath, pretty frail looking. It was sitting on its bottom, knees bent, back against the brick front of the rest area, to the left of the front doors of the rest area. It was sitting with its back straight, tall, and erect. It seemed in awe of me, or maybe in awe that I was actually approaching it. It looked vaguely like a human, very vaguely. Its face was snake-like. Its eyes were right on me. I threw a little everyday smile in its direction, and I did something strange. I continued to walk toward the rest area, even after seeing it. I walked towards the rest area building, closer to it. I walked forward about 20 foot from the rear of the van to the rest area steps, up to 20 steps or so, and to the right, where the vending machine was located. My thoughts at this point were very bizarre in retrospect. I felt bad for the thing. I didn't want to feel different. I know that sounds hilariously quaint if you're indeed talking about an interdimensional being, but I didn't want to run back into the van because I didn't want to hurt its feelings. I didn't want to make it feel like a freak. It already told me that it could not be seen due to the way people would react, so I wanted to know that I didn't judge it for the way it looked and that I was willing to come to terms with its horrific appearance in order to extend some humanity to it. So it was that very bizarrely strong conviction to be righteous and humane to it that I walked towards the vending machine. I actually got pretzels. I'm telling you, my stomach was churning. I used the vending machine with my back. I used the vending machine with my back to it. Pretzels in hand, I swiveled around to look at it again before descending back down the steps. It was at that moment that pure terror rippled through me. I was closer to it now, approximately 15 foot away, and I could see now that there was definitely no way that it was human. It was staring right at me with the like a wide-eyed insect. It was still in exactly the same position, except that it had turned its head to look at me better as my position changed. It looked like an alien. It looked like a demon. It was not human. Its huge, one-dimensional eyes did not have any whites. They were almond-shaped like the classic alien eye that we all know. It was then that I realized that this was extremely tall, unthinkably tall. Although I was standing and it was sitting, its head was still taller than mine. Its huge eyes were fixed on me totally, with fascination, alarm, and with the most intense focus, just like the way my cat looks at something right before she pounces on it. When I had to make the decision to climb the stairs towards it and not to retreat to the van, I thought that it was sitting on top of something, and that is why its head raised up so high. Now, from closer perspective, I could see that it was not sitting on anything but on its butt. If I had realized if I had realized that it was this tall and I very well nigh had going up the steps. So after the ripple of terror went through me, I responded by smiling the way you smile at a stranger when your eyes catch him on the bus. I shot at a casual, thin, innocuous little "Hey, how you doing?" smile. Why and how I acted as if things were totally normal, I can't explain. I've never acted so cool in my life. If I were to guess what the thing was doing when I encountered it, judging by its body language, I would say that it was somewhat displaced and resting. But I have no clue. But maybe it was just in the middle of something far more sinister. It did not look like a mutant or an experiment. It looked ancient, timeless, and placeless, graceful and horrible. It was also firmly in this dimension when I saw it. It was not a hazy vision in the slightest. The lighting was not dim. It was not even remotely ethereal experience. The extremely bright lights that illuminated the front facade of the rest area building concealed every contour of this entity. If it only had been closer, I would have provided much more detail about the facial features. As I was walking back to the van, I quickly strategized about how to make sure that my fear did not paralyze me and prohibit me from getting safely into the car. I decided not to look back or even around me as I turned the key, because if I saw that it had moved or I saw it coming towards me, I would have been too terrified to manage with the car keys. I got in the van, I locked the door, I screamed that we need to leave immediately, and we did. And as we drove away about 90 seconds after it was last in my sight, I looked out the window and saw that it was gone. There was nothing where I had been, just brick wall and concrete floor. I began to tell my boyfriend that I had just had the ultimate experience, and although he was a dude who was always going on about Vitas and Madame Blavatsky and whatnot, for some reason his only response was a trite, "We're in Florida, what do you expect?" He was an extremely abusive person, so I decided to leave it at that and not attempt to share any more with him. Now, as far as the height of the entity, at first I thought that it was about 9 to 10 foot tall. Now that I'm drawing a diagram, I realize that it was likely significantly taller. As I said, its head stood taller than mine. Even though I was standing and it was sitting, I'm 5'4". That means it was approximately 6 feet tall from its butt to the top of its head. From its butt to its knees, it may have been 4 to 5 foot, and from its knees to feet, 3 feet. But that means that it was about 14 feet tall. I can hardly wrap my head around that. So that was quite an interesting and very descriptive. You don't get them that descriptive too often. James asked, did it have eye color? No, I think it was black. From what I read from her, I think she would have definitely mentioned it. You just never know what, James said, you just never know what direction these cases will turn. That's true. Now, going back to the Mandy case I read about, Bernard asked, why do you think Mandy was taken? I don't know. I never got any indication as to why. But to be honest with you, these cases where people are abducted, we never really know why it happens. Unless they come back and describe their, what happened to them. Very rarely do we ever get an idea of why it happened. Some people just don't come back. It has happened. Maybe not as dramatic as this, but we hear about it all the time. I don't know what the statistics are, though I've perused a few of them. There's a lot of people that go missing for whatever reason worldwide. Are some of these alien abductions or something to do with supernatural, paranormal? I believe so. Yeah, I believe so. So Yeah, I don't know why it happened. I am intuitive, but I just never really got a feel as to why it did happen. Okay. I'm just looking over a few things real quick. Okay. I don't want to get lost. Okay, this is a case. The next one is a case that Butch and I worked on. And in fact, Butch did go to the witness, whose name was John Feathers, excuse me. And he did talk to him and the other witness about this. So it is documented, and it has to do with the upright canines dogman phenomena here in Pennsylvania. So, but John did reach out to me initially, and it occurred on September 3rd. I received it on September 3rd of 2015. So this was almost 2 years after this had happened. So, and from talking to him by phone, he was pretty reluctant about making a report, but eventually he did. He opened up, and then they were able to talk to Butch in person. But Butch did go to the location. So he writes, I am currently a resident of Altoona, Pennsylvania. I am writing this to report a strange encounter I experienced with a friend of mine in the early morning hours of Sunday, March 17, 2013. The incident is now over 2 years old. I chose not to report this event prior to now due to an unwillingness to expose myself or my family and friends to public scrutiny. In light of the recent spat of similar sightings in central Pennsylvania, I have changed my mind. Perhaps our experience will help with the current research. As such, I would like to make my intention clear that myself and any persons mentioned please retain anonymity at this time. And they later came out and were able to identify them, which they approved. Reporting a Bigfoot or even a UFO sighting is one thing, but this was somewhat different. Now, on the evening in question, a friend and I were returning from a job that I had performed in Williamsburg, Pennsylvania. They had a band, actually, and when the gig was over, they were driving back. My friend was driving. To the best of my recollection, the incident occurred somewhere between 1:30 a.m. and 2 a.m. on the morning of March 17th. We were traveling southwest on Route 22 through what is locally known as Geezytown, as a rural suburb of Hollidaysburg, Pennsylvania. Now, as we rounded the little curve in the road, our attention was drawn to the left on the opposite side of the road, standing and squatting in a clearing a few feet off the side of the road was some kind of creature. My friend wasn't driving very fast and slowed a bit as we approached. Now, our initial view of it was from its dorsal side as it was facing away from us. It came into profile as we passed with its right side to us. It struck me immediately that the creature had a combination of both human and canine features. It was squatting down on its legs close to the ground, but was doing so in a bipedal fashion. The legs had the stifled joint and hock characteristic of a canine, not like a human leg. It had its front limbs, arms in front of it, and I believe it was possibly crouched over something, maybe a smaller animal. The arms were long in proportion to its body, and I recall thinking the hands were more human-like as opposed to paws. Its torso seemed to be somewhat hunched forward. I had the impression that any moment it could have gone on all fours quite comfortably. The creature's chest was not broad like a human's, but had a pronounced forward-angled breastbone like a canid. It gave an impression of great strength, having distinct and well-defined musculature, but was not built on a massive frame. It seemed more thin and sinewy. If it had stood fully erect, I would estimate that the creature would have been close to 7 foot tall. It was covered in fur that was gray-silver in color. The creature seemed unnaturally shiny, although this could have been a reflection from the headlights or the moon. It had pointy, erect canine ears that were somewhat laid back on its head. The head was large and very wolf-like in overall appearance. The muzzle was also very wolf-like, canted, although the snout wasn't exceptionally elongated. It had canine-like teeth. To the best of my recollection, the eyes were amber color, but may have been a reddish glow reflection to them. It had a wolf-like tail. It turned its head to watch us and tracked us as we passed. It seemed quite aware of our presence. Now, my friend and I continued in stunned silence for a few moments. When the creature was no longer in view, I turned and asked my friend what we had just seen. He said, "We just saw a friggin' wolf," were his exact words. I agree that this is pretty much my own assessment. I asked if we could turn the car around, but he absolutely refused to do so. We spent the rest of the trip debating on whether it could have been a dog or someone's escaped pet wolf, but to be honest, it just wasn't. I'm sure that both my friend and I are experienced outdoorsmen, and neither one of us have ever seen anything fitting that description before. I was actually raised not far from the area and know it well. I have spoken to my friend about this, and neither one of us would be willing to take a polygraph concerning this incident. Please feel free to contact me if you have any questions. Now, at that time, I had the opportunity to talk to both witnesses. Each mentioned an interesting point, which Butch and I found pretty interesting as well, is that this creature had like a silvery aura around it. It was a unique detail. And I'll be honest, I don't think we've ever received anything similar to that before. This kind of raised my hackles a bit. And so suggesting that this may have been supernatural. Now, Butch and I were both familiar with the Lenape folklore concerning these canids, these dogmen, or whatever you want to call them. We did consult a shaman or elder who was actually a Cherokee shaman or elder, and we did look into more of the Lenape traditions for possibly linking this being. I don't know. I don't know if we got much information or not. I don't really think we did. But quite frankly, these cases that we have received since Butch and I started looking into this really did concentrate in central Pennsylvania for the most part. We used that term, the lichen loop. Certain counties have had decent activity. That was Blair County. Center County, we had one in Juniata, Cambria County, Clearfield. Yeah, those areas had an exceptional amount of activity, which is unusual because we're not getting as much in those areas as before. We're getting more now in the eastern part of the state. And in fact, I talked to a newspaper reporter today about the activity in and around the Pocono area in northeast Pennsylvania. And yeah, those are hot areas. So, we'll have to see what else comes up. But of course, we're still looking into this one case. And we will be having the witness to the Berks County case coming on the show in a couple of weeks. Tim Renner and Chad Redding are going to be with me on that show as well from our team. So they have talked to the individual. So that should be interesting. This gentleman's name is Matt. I tell you, after he had his encounter, he has really gone deeply into all this. I got to give him credit. He's really done a lot of research. So it should be a very interesting show. I don't know. Do we have any more questions on that? I guess not. Well, at the end of the show, we can cover everything. Well, speaking of cases, this was a winged humanoid encounter, abduction from Indiana. It was, we put it as part of the sightings in and around the Chicago area. We have been collecting data and sightings within a 250 mile radius of Chicago, and this fit in there. And be honestly and quite frank with you, we have had cases reported to us from Indiana. Indiana, for whatever reason, there's a lot of phenomena that happens in Indiana. And it's pretty weird for the most part. But anyway, let me read this. I received a phone call describing a harrowing account from the eyewitness FH. Though his name is Floyd, so I'll just go, he's gone ahead and allowed us to use his name. The incident occurred on the night of October 27th, 1969 in Rolling Prairie, Indiana. And Lloyd was a young child at the time. He states that he and his family, mother, father, sister, and grandmother, were living in a trailer situated on their family's land. The trailer had sustained damage on the roof, leaving a large hole. Now, the hole was covered with a wide waterproof tarp until it was to be repaired. Now, he and his baby sister shared a bedroom. He was awakened by a strange noise and a strong, disagreeable odor. As he looked towards his sister's crib, he saw a tall, winged humanoid staring down at her. The being slowly turned and looked at the horrified witness. The description was a very tall being that was crouched a bit. He estimates that it stood 7 to 8 foot in height. The body and face had black hair. The leather-like wings were huge and shaped like that of a bat or gargoyle. It had muscular detached arms and legs. The body and face were thin and looked like a human skeleton with obvious sharp teeth. The eyes were dark and also made a low garbled sound. He screamed in order to alert his parents in the adjoining room, but they never responded. His grandmother was alerted and came to his aid, though she was stunned at the sight and immediately fell to her knees. The creature picked him up in his arms and made its way into the living room, where it ascended through the hole in the ceiling. It's obvious that it had moved the tarp in order to gain access inside the trailer. He remembers being very cold and wet and hearing his grandmother screaming as the winged humanoid took off into the sky. He has no idea how long he was gone, but he only remembers waking in his bed among his panicked parents and grandmother. Now, he states that his grandmother witnessed the entire event and documented it. His living relatives concur with the account since his grandmother recalled what had happened to each of them. His grandmother passed away in 1985. Now, his parents woke after the abduction. It seemed that they were somehow placed in a hypnotic state until the winged being left the premises with him. And after several minutes, they all heard scratching noises and a loud thud on the roof. His father immediately gained access to the roof where he saw Floyd laying unconscious. They were able to quickly bring him into the trailer, dry him off, and place him in his bed. They were reluctant to call the authorities or seek medical assistance because of the bizarre event. He recovered, but has endured emotional problems his entire life, which he attributes to the abduction. Now, at the time of the Mothman Prophecies film release, he had a mental breakdown after watching in a theater. He literally had to leave during the scene where the Mothman caused the automobile crash and death. He has not attempted to watch the film since. Now, I asked him why he called me. He stated that he had received a call from his cousin, who was aware of the winged humanoid sightings in Indiana, and he gave me my contact information. Now, the sketch is Floyd's sketch, and I think that Vince has put it up there. So he seems very forthright and but quite nervous. He seemed relieved that there had been other eyewitnesses to similar winged beings. And, you know, honestly, he was a good witness. He did seem like something really happened to him. And I will say, you know, through this, all these ordeals and saga with the winged humanoids, the Chicago Mothman, or Heron Mothman, the witnesses are been very forthcoming and do not embellish on these sightings. You know, they make their report to us, and they stick with it. So that's going to be the last report for the night. So if you have questions, feel free to ask me. You want to put them up, Vince, and I can see them. Carol asked, where do they come from? I wish I knew, but we have some indications that they're interdimensional beings, ultra-terrestrial beings that exist on a dimension that's very linear and close to our Earth dimension, our Earth plane. You know, I've had this theory about most cryptids anyway for a long time, that I think they're interdimensional beings, that they do have abilities to move in and out. But we really haven't found the mechanism for that or the reason for that. And it's all based on theory at this point. But I think it's very close to what's really going on. And anything new from David Eckhart? No, I haven't really had any new information from David. I have talked to him, but it's basically about the same thing. They show up occasionally. Now, the beings that do show up, they do change up once in a while. You know, he's had several groups of different beings that have been a part of this whole scenario with him. But as far as new photos or new information or evidence, I just have not received that much from him. And if I do, I will put it up. I guess I should try to get him on the show again in the near future. So I'll talk to him about it and see if he wants to come on. Crawley asked, heard a correlation with the Mothman and Jersey Devil due to the flaps. Thoughts? You know, I guess it could be. I've had people give that correlation before. You know, the Jersey Devil thing, I don't discount people. I don't believe the lore behind it, you know, the Leeds story. I don't believe that. Quite frankly, the Jersey Devil didn't initially start, those sightings didn't initially start in New Jersey or the Pine Barrens. They actually started down the eastern shore of Maryland, and they started gravitating north. And then the Leeds legend came into point, not fact. So I don't know what to make of that. You know, the descriptions of the Jersey Devil are very distinct, with the horse-like face and the strange shape to it, the long tail. In some cases, sometimes it doesn't. It has the bat-like wing. The very heavy flapping that you hear, you know, with these cases in Chicago and around Chicago, we don't hear the flapping a whole lot. These beings seem to have some type of mechanism to where they can literally fly without the use of their wings. They have a propulsion that we just don't understand. Not all of them. Some of them do flap their wings and have seen flap their wings and take off. But yeah, I don't know if there's much correlation or not. Now, when you say flaps, I guess maybe you thought about the sightings. I don't know. Again, I don't know if there's a correlation. Do you want to go down to Eckert's again and put yourself in the middle of that? I've never been to David's. I have never been there, and the reason why I never went down there, you know, my wife, when she was alive, she did not want me going down there. She was very familiar with the case, and she kept on top of it, and she had a bad feeling about it from the very beginning. And she did not want me going down. Now, she passed in 2015, but I haven't been down there since. David has asked me to come down on numerous occasions. So I don't know. You know, I know of instances where other people have gone there, and some of the stories I have heard from them, because there have been other investigators that have gone there and who have contacted me directly to tell me some of the things that they experienced, and then a lot of them were not good. One investigator was physically attacked on many occasions and had some really horrific bruising. So it's not been good for a lot of the people. I just don't think that they like David bringing people in there. And you know, now his daughter-in-law has been involved with some of this as well, and they don't seem to mind her. But the other family members don't really seem to want to be involved with it anymore. So yeah, so that's about where it stands. I don't know if I'm ever going to make it down to Davis, to be honest with you. I may. I do have apprehension about it. I just got that little sixth sense thing telling me that it might not turn out well. Though they do know I've been involved with David's investigation. I have encountered them in my residence. I believe they were the same beings that abducted me, or were associated with those beings that abducted me. And I was warned when I got involved with David's case that this may very well happen as well. So Andrew asked, are government investigators been around sighting areas? Yeah, they occasionally show up. I mean, I've had inquiries from government folks before. But of course, you know, you think about the story with my Bigfoot encounter back in '81, there were definitely government investigators there. Yeah, I mean, they're involved. I mean, there's no disputing that. They definitely have an interest in a lot of the phenomena that happens. As far as the winged humanoids, I don't know. You know, early on, we had some black helicopter sightings and actual troops that may have actually gone into a location in central Illinois. You know, it was kind of a bizarre case because there was gunfire involved, and then they came out, and the witness stated that he didn't really see them carrying anything out, but it was dark. But he said it was definitely he was definitely some type of military with the vehicles and everything else. As far as government, of course, you know, military is government. So as far as the winged humanoids and those, I haven't really seen much association with that. It's a lot of incidental stuff that very well could be connected, but I really don't know. Crowley, what are your thoughts on these being ultra terrestrials or interdimensional? Well, I think they are. I think they are. They don't like to be, you know, through our bit of communication we have had, they don't like to be known as aliens or extraterrestrials. They do acknowledge that they're interdimensional to a degree, but the ultra terrestrial moniker is probably as close as what they will accept as far as calling them. We have had people on the team who have had some connection with them. But at this point, I don't really know what to think about any of that. I know I haven't had any connection with them. I'm not saying that the people on the team who did state they had connection may have been imagining it. I don't think so. I think there was a connection. But all I know is I have not experienced that. Anything else? Okay. Well, folks, thanks for coming on tonight and listen to me and listen to the stories. And if you do like me reading some of the older cases and such, I'll try to incorporate that into some of the future shows. So let me know. And if you have an unexplained encounter, sighting, or feel free to contact me at Phantoms Monsters blog site. Just thanks to each and all of you for watching and chatting. It's great having people come on here and ask your questions. I know a lot of other people appreciate it. And, your support is what makes this all possible. So please like, subscribe, share. Your monetary donations are very appreciated as well. You can do it through YouTube, or you can do it through the Buy Me a Coffee link, but it is appreciated. So anyway, if you want to send anything to my email, it's Lon Strickler, phantomsandmonsters.com. Now, this Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific, we're going to present paranormal experiencer Alice Jackson and investigator John Bullard. The documentary film The House in Between and the subsequent follow-up release detail Alice's personal ordeal in which her Mississippi dream home turned into a nightmare after a life-changing supernatural incident. Should be a great show, so I hope to see you in the chat. And if you do get a chance to watch the film, I recommend it. It's interesting. It's a little different than most that you see. It leaves a lot of questions, but look at it. You have questions for the guest on the show, then come on Friday night. And I know you can watch it on Tubi and Pluto for free. So if you have those access, those channel access, check them out. Both part 1 and part 2 are available. It's The House in Between. So until then, stay healthy, have a safe, enjoyable week. Good night.